The Manhattan skyline shimmered against the velvet dusk, its glass towers catching the dying light like a crown of fire. From the penthouse balcony of the Martinez residence, the city looked infinite, full of possibility and promise. In the heart of it all, Lillian Smith stood at the dining table, where she had spent hours preparing her hands, still trembling, as she adjusted the last crystal glass. The table was an artwork. Silver cutlery gleamed under the soft, golden glow of chandelier lights. Candles flickered, filling the air with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. A folded napkin embroidered with golden threads sat like a small crown on each plate. Lillian had gone beyond perfection tonight, not because Logan Martinez, her husband, demanded it, but because she wanted this evening to be unforgettable. For tucked beneath her heart was a secret, tender and luminous. She was carrying his child. Her heart fluttered with every passing second, rehearsing silently the words she longed to say. "Logan, we're going to be parents." She imagined his arms wrapping around her, his deep voice breaking into laughter, his eyes softening in awe. In those imagined moments, she saw a family being born, a love being sealed with destiny. Lillian brushed her curls back from her face and caught her reflection in the wide French mirrors along the wall. She was radiant tonight, her deep brown skin glowing under the soft light, her silk emerald gown flowing like liquid ivy against her tall frame. A woman in love, a woman ready to embrace motherhood, a woman who believed her world was finally whole. Logan Martinez had always been a man of contradictions. To the world, he was the dazzling billionaire CEO of Martinez Global, a titan of real estate, whose face often appeared on the cover of Fortune and Forbes. To Lillian, however, he was something far more fragile, a man who could be tender one moment and ruthless the next. He had swept her off her feet years ago when she was just an event planner managing a gala in Chicago. She remembered the night vividly, his piercing blue eyes finding her across the ballroom, his charm folding her into a world she had never dared to dream. Against all odds, their love had blossomed, despite whispers, despite raised brows, at the union of a wealthy white billionaire and a young black woman with modest roots. Their story had always carried the weight of disapproval, yet Lillian had believed their bond was unshakable, strong enough to silence the world. Tonight, she thought, would prove it beyond doubt. The clock chimed softly, marking 7:30. Logan was late, but that was not unusual. Meetings, deals, and last-minute negotiations often chained him to his office. She lit another candle and smiled, whispering, "Just a little longer and he'll be here. He'll be." Tonight, everything changes. Her phone buzzed a message. "On my way." Her heart leapt. She clasped her hands over her stomach, feeling the faintest spark of life. "He'll know soon," she whispered. "We'll finally be a family." The elevator echoed through the hallway, followed by the firm click of Italian leather shoes. Logan entered the penthouse in a dark tailored suit. His tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled from the day. His presence filled the room instantly, tall, commanding, with an aura that always made people pause. But tonight, his eyes were cold. Lillian rushed to him, arms ready to embrace, but froze at the icy expression on his face. He didn't look at the table, the candles, or the effort she had poured into every detail. Instead, he walked to the bar and poured himself a drink, downing it in one motion. "Logan," she said softly, her voice unsure. "You're home." "Yes." His voice was clipped flat. "And I don't intend to stay long." The words struck her like a slap. "Logan, what do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. He turned then, his jaw tense, his eyes avoiding hers. "I want a divorce." The room spun. The candles flickered violently as if the air itself recoiled. Lillian's breath caught in her throat. "What, Logan? No, you can't mean that." We were happy. Just last week That was last week, he interrupted, his voice like ice. Things have changed. I've changed. And so have my priorities. Her hands shook. Priorities, Logan. We are your family. He laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off marble walls. Family. Don't fool yourself, Lillian. You were a distraction. A pretty face from Harlem who thought she could fit into my world. But you never did. Tears burned her eyes. She had fought so hard to believe she belonged. Logan, please. Tonight was supposed to be special. Stop. His hand cut the air sharply. Don't embarrass yourself. I don't love you. I don't want this marriage. Sign the papers and leave my home. Her knees weakened, but she steadied herself on the table's edge. She wanted to scream, to collapse, to disappear, but instead she whispered, trembling, I'm pregnant, Logan. His eyes flicked toward her for the first time, shock flashing for a brief second. Then just as quickly, his face hardened. That child isn't mine. Her lips parted in disbelief. How can you say that? You know it's yours. I don't care. I will not be chained to you or your mistakes. You think a baby will save this? It won't. Her heart broke into pieces. At that moment, she realized she was no longer looking at the man she loved, but a stranger wearing his face. Lillian turned away, pressing her palm against her stomach, tears falling silently down her cheeks. The dinner she had so carefully prepared blurred before her eyes, the candles, the roses, the meal, all meaningless now. But amid the wreckage, she felt the faint flutter of life inside her. A tiny heartbeat, fragile, yet fierce. And she knew then that her story wasn't ending. It was only the beginning. She straightened her shoulders, wiping her tears with trembling hands. Logan might have cast her aside, but she would not surrender. She would protect this child. She would rise from this heartbreak. Because sometimes the most incredible stories are born from the ruins of broken promises. Dear listener, know you are not alone. If your heart aches with Lillian's tonight, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal or the weight of dreams shattering in your hands, her journey is only beginning, and so is yours. Stay with this story. Leave a word for Lillian in the comments. Tell her you are here, that her fight is not in vain. Share your love with a like so she knows she is not unseen. Follow this channel, because what comes next will remind you that no darkness is too deep for light to find its way. The city never slept, but in Harlem, its nights carried a different weight. The neon signs flickered, the hum of traffic never ceased, and a siren wailed like a restless ghost somewhere in the distance. For most, it was just another ordinary night in New York. But for Lillian Smith, it was the beginning of a life she had never imagined for herself. The penthouse with its glass walls and glittering skyline was gone. The polished marble floors, the scent of imported roses, the closet filled with gowns, all gone, left behind in the wreckage of a broken promise. Now she stood in a one-bedroom walk-up in Harlem. The walls were thin, the radiator groaned, and the paint peeled like forgotten memories. The hallway smelled of fried food, stale cigarettes, and exhaustion. For the first time in years, she felt small, invisible, stripped of every illusion of belonging to Logan's glittering world. She sat on the edge of her worn mattress, hands resting on the slight swell of her belly. The silence of the room pressed against her chest, heavy and merciless. The child within her was real, its fragile heartbeat carrying her forward when her own seemed too weak to endure. But the loneliness was suffocating. She had been surrounded by luxury in the penthouse, but at least there was space, silence, order. Here, chaos was her new companion. Children cried in the hallway, doors slammed at odd hours, and couples argued through thin walls. yet none of it compared to the storm inside her. At night when she closed her eyes, she still saw Logan's face, the cold dismissal in his eyes, the venom in his words. "You were nothing. That child isn't mine." Those words carved into her like knives, and sometimes she would wake with tears already on her face, hands clutching her belly as if shielding the child from their father's rejection. Bills came faster than she could count them. Rent, food, prenatal care. Everything was a weight she bore alone, with no support, no husband, and only scraps of savings. Lillian was forced to work, even as her body ached with pregnancy. By day, she cleaned office buildings in Midtown, scrubbing away the footprints of people who would never know her name. No matter how hard she washed, the smell of bleach clung to her skin. By evening, she worked at a small diner in Brooklyn, her swollen ankles throbbing with every step as she served plates of burgers and fries to impatient customers. Sometimes, when exhaustion blurred her vision, she whispered to the child inside her, "Hold on for me, baby. Just hold on. Mommy will make it through this." At night, she took sewing jobs from neighbors, stitching old clothes together by the dim light of a borrowed lamp. Her fingers pricked with tiny cuts, but she didn't stop. Survival left no room for weakness. The child came earlier than expected. One evening, after finishing her shift at the diner, Lillian felt a sharp pain so sudden and overwhelming, it bent her in half. She clutched her stomach, gasping, and staggered into the nearest restroom. The world blurred into agony. Her cries were swallowed by the sound of flushing water and the pounding of her heart. Sweat soaked her dress, and her knees gave out on the cold tile floor. Alone, with no hand to hold, no comforting voice, she brought her twins into the world. Two fragile boys, their cries thin but fierce, piercing the walls of that cramped bathroom like a hymn of defiance. Lillian collapsed against the wall, sobbing, as she gathered them into her arms. Tiny, warm, helpless, yet undeniably alive. Malik and Jordan, her sons, her reason. She pressed her forehead to theirs, whispering through tears, "You are mine. You are everything, and I will never ever let you go." Those first months blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and endless exhaustion. Malik cried with the ferocity of fire, demanding the world's attention, while Jordan was quieter, watching with wide, thoughtful eyes. Lillian fed them with trembling hands, sometimes unsure if she had enough to give. Her body was weak, her spirit frayed, but every cry from her children pulled her back from the edge. Neighbors gossiped about the young single mother with twins, some with pity, others with disdain. But Lillian didn't care. She wrapped her babies against her chest and carried them through the city streets, whispering lullabies, promising them a future brighter than her present. On nights when hunger gnawed at her stomach, because she had skipped meals to feed them, she told herself it didn't matter. They would grow strong. She would endure. Her mother visited when she could, bringing food baskets and slipping folded bills into the diaper bag when Lillian wasn't looking. Her mother whispered, holding the babies close, "You're stronger than you think." Her sister Danielle sometimes watched the twins so Lillian could work extra shifts. Danielle would say, "You'll get through this," pressing her hand to Lillian's shoulder. "You don't see it yet, but these boys are your blessing." Their support was small, but steady, a fragile net keeping her from falling completely. Amid the struggle, moments of light pierced through. The first time Malik laughed, a bubbling sound, like music, Lillian wept with joy. The first time Jordan reached out with tiny fingers to brush away her tear, she felt something unshakable take root in her heart. In those moments, the world shrank to just the three of them. No betrayals, luxury lost, or cruel words echoing in her memory. Only a mother and her children, bound by love, fiercer than any storm. Meanwhile, Logan's name still adorned magazine covers. She couldn't escape him entirely. At the newsstand on the corner, his face often stared back at her, smiling, polished, powerful. She tried to look away, but sometimes her eyes lingered, filled, not with longing, but with anger. The world saw him as untouchable, but she knew the truth. Behind the billion-dollar empire was a man who had abandoned his flesh and blood. And though she had no desire for revenge in those early days, too consumed by survival, there was a quiet fire inside her, a fire that whispered, "One day he will see. One day he will know what he threw away." Late one night, as rain tapped gently against the window, Lillian sat with her sons cradled in her arms. The city lights blurred in the distance, smearing gold and blue against the black sky. She kissed their tiny foreheads, her voice steady, though her heart trembled. "You are not nothing," she whispered. "You are everything. And I will build a world for you no matter how this one tries to break us." The twins stirred, their soft breaths filling the silence. In their faces, she saw not only the fragility of life, but its boundless strength. And in that moment, Lillian Smith was reborn, broken, exhausted, abandoned. She was no longer the woman defined by Logan Martinez's cruelty. She was a mother, fierce and unyielding, standing at the edge of an abyss and vowing to climb. The city roared around her, but she no longer feared it. For within her arms was her salvation, her reason to rise again. Morning light spilled through the thin curtains of the Harlem apartment, painting the walls in hues of pale gold. The city was already alive outside, horns blaring, footsteps rushing, vendors calling out as they set up their stalls. For Lillian Smith, mornings were always the hardest because they meant another day of survival. She rose quietly, careful not to wake Malik and Jordan. The twins lay curled against each other, tiny fists resting on their chests, breathing in perfect rhythm. Even in sleep, they seemed to hold on to each other, as if they already knew the world could be cruel. Lillian brushed her curls back, tied them into a loose bun, and stepped into the kitchenette. There wasn't much, just a chipped counter, an old stove, and perpetually empty cupboards. Yet standing there, she felt something stir, a memory. Her grandmother's kitchen in Georgia, the smell of cornbread rising in the oven, pots of collard greens simmering, and the warm, rich laughter that filled the room. That kitchen had been small, too smaller than this one, but it had been alive with love. As the twins stirred, Lillian whispered to herself, "If love were enough, we would have everything." Later that week, after another grueling shift at the diner, she lingered in the kitchen after hours. The cook, an older man named Mr. Reynolds, was packing up for the night. "Lillian, you've got a good hand with food," he remarked as he saw her adjust the seasoning on a leftover soup pot. "Better than mine some nights." She smiled faintly. "Cooking was always home for me. My grandma taught me when I was little. Food wasn't just about feeding stomachs, it was about feeding hearts." He chuckled. "Smart woman. With hands like yours, you could do more than scrub tables." The words lingered long after she left. As she rocked the twins to sleep that night, her mind spun with possibilities. Could she turn the one thing that had always given her joy into something more? Into survival. Not just survival, but dignity. The idea began slowly, like a flame catching on damp wood. She began small, baking cornbread and sweet potato pies in her tiny Harlem kitchen, selling them to neighbors for a few dollars. Her mother spread the word at church. Danielle told her co-workers. Soon, people began knocking on her door, asking, "Do you have any of that pie left?" Lillian woke before dawn, balancing flour, sugar, and butter with bottles and lullabies. The apartment filled with the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg, masking the musty air that had once made her ache. Money was still tight, but it trickled in. Enough for diapers, enough for milk, enough to keep the twins warm when winter pressed against the windows. And more than that, it gave her a flicker of pride. For the first time since Logan had torn her world apart, she felt the weight of despair shift slightly into something else purpose. By spring, her neighbors convinced her to set up a small stand at the Harlem weekend market. She borrowed a folding table from a friend, covered it with a bright cloth, and arranged her pies and breads with trembling hands. The first morning she almost turned back. Who would buy from her? What if she failed? But then Malik laughed in his stroller, and Jordan's wide eyes encouraged her silently. She stayed, and by noon, her table was empty. Word spread quickly about the young woman with the radiant smile, selling pies that tasted like home. Older men returned for seconds, children begged their mothers for more, and women leaned in to ask if she catered for special occasions. Each compliment lit something inside her. Each smile from a customer was a thread stitching together the tatters of her confidence. It wasn't easy. For every good day there were harder ones. Rainy markets when no one stopped. Nights when she burned her hands rushing between the oven and the babies. Weeks when she questioned if the sacrifice was worth it. But every time doubt clawed at her, she looked at Malik and Jordan. Their laughter, their small arms reaching for her, it was enough. There were moments of despair, still, like when she passed Logan's image on a billboard in Times Square, larger than life, untouched by consequence. She would clutch her shopping bags tighter, push her stroller faster, swallowing the bitterness in her throat. But she refused to let that bitterness poison her dreams. It was Danielle who named it. "You need a brand," her sister insisted one evening. "Something people will remember. You're not just selling pies anymore. Lil, you're building something. Call it Smith's Kitchen. It's yours and it's theirs. It's family." The name struck deep. Smith's Kitchen. A reminder of where she came from, of the lineage of women who had stirred pots and seasoned food with love before her. So she painted the name on a wooden sign, crude but proud, and set it above her market table. And under that sign, she began to build a business and a legacy. As months passed, Malik and Jordan grew into lively toddlers. Malik was bold, quick to laugh, and constantly testing boundaries. Jordan was gentler and thoughtful, his eyes studying the world as if he were already older than his years. They became fixtures at the market, charming customers with their innocence. People came not just for the food, but for the sight of the young mother and her twins, symbols of resilience, hope, and love. At night, when exhaustion wrapped around her like chains, Lillian would watch them sleep and whisper, "We're building something, my loves. Piece by piece, we're building our tomorrow." One afternoon, a woman in a tailored coat approached her stand. She carried herself with the confidence of wealth, but her eyes softened when she tasted the sweet potato pie. "This is extraordinary," the woman said. "Do you cater for private events? I have a gathering next month. My husband is a senator. He would adore this." Lillian's heart pounded. She nodded, her smile steady, even as her knees trembled. Yes, Smith's Kitchen would be honored. It was her first real catering order, a door opening into a world she had once believed closed to her forever. By the end of that year, Smith's Kitchen had become more than a small stand. It was a name people knew, a taste people sought out. It had become her armor, her proof that she was more than what Logan had called her. She was no longer just the abandoned wife, the girl from Harlem, but she was Lillian Smith, the woman who had risen from ruin to carve a path for herself and her children. Yet beneath the triumph, there was still a quiet ache. Every time Malik's laughter echoed, every time Jordan reached for her hand, she thought of the man who had denied them. A man who lived only a few miles away, surrounded by wealth and power, blind to the miracle he had cast aside. And though she told herself she didn't need him, a whisper lingered in her heart. One day he will know. One day he will see. That night, after putting the twins to bed, Lillian sat at the table, her hands dusted with flour, the scent of pies still heavy in the air. She looked at the sign propped against the wall, Smith's Kitchen, and smiled through tears. Her world was still fragile, and her future was still uncertain. But she felt the ground beneath her feet for the first time in years. She felt strength coursing through her veins. And as she whispered goodnight to her children, she knew this was only the beginning. The abyss had not swallowed her. She had planted seeds in the darkness, and now they were beginning to grow. The winter in Manhattan had a cruel sharpness that year. Snow blanketed the avenues, muffling the city's usual roar, while icy winds swept down the Hudson and rattled against skyscrapers. For most, it was simply another season. For Logan Martinez, it was another reminder of how alone power could feel. His empire stood taller than ever. Martinez Holdings had expanded into Europe and Asia. His face graced the covers of Forbes and Business Weekly, and investors spoke his name with reverence. Yet behind the polished exterior, Logan carried a gnawing restlessness. Nights in his penthouse, overlooking Central Park, no longer carried comfort. He would sit by the glass wall, whiskey in hand, staring at the glittering city lights below. The silence pressed in too thickly, even when women from high society tried to fill it. None stayed long. None touched the hollow space carved years ago. But Logan refused to think of her, or the night he had cut her out of his life. One evening at a gala in the Plaza Hotel, Logan stood in conversation with fellow magnates. His smile practiced, his confidence untouchable. Servers glided by with trays of champagne, chandeliers glittered above, and the hum of elite chatter filled the air. It was then he overheard it, soft, almost careless. "You have to try her pies," a senator's wife said, laughing. "Smith's Kitchen. Simply divine. We had her cater last week, and even my husband asked for seconds." Imagine him of all people. The words were harmless, casual, yet something about the name struck like flint against steel. Smith. Logan's glass paused at his lips. A heat rose in his chest, unbidden, unwanted. He turned slightly, catching more of the conversation. "She's become quite the name in Harlem markets," the woman continued. "A young mother, I hear. 2 adorable little boys. People adore her story as much as her cooking. It's all over the community pages. A name, a hint of familiarity. 2 children. Logan forced his gaze back to his companions, but the laughter around him faded into a distant hum. His thoughts churned sharp and jagged. Logan poured himself another drink at his penthouse, though he barely touched it. He leaned against the glass wall, staring at the skyline, as if the city itself owed him answers. Smith's Kitchen. Coincidence? It had to be. Smith was a common name, and yet he couldn't shake the unease curling in his gut. 2 children. 2 boys. Memories he had buried clawed their way back. Lillian's tearful eyes, her hands trembling as she swore the child was his. His rage, his refusal. The sound of the door slamming behind her. He told himself it was impossible. He had been careful. He had been sure. And even if... Logan dragged a hand through his hair, cursing under his breath. He didn't want to think about her. Not now. Not ever. And yet the whisper of her name lingered like perfume in a room long after the woman had left. Meanwhile in Harlem, life in Lillian's world was blooming despite the cold. Malik and Jordan, now 3 years old, filled their apartment with laughter and chaos. Malik was daring, constantly climbing onto furniture, turning spoons into swords. Jordan is quieter, prefers books and puzzles, and asks questions far beyond his age. They were simply children to outsiders, but to Lillian, they were proof that life could grow from ashes, proof that love could outshine rejection. At the market they sat bundled in scarves beside her stand, charming customers with their smiles. People had begun calling them the little princes of Smith's kitchen. And though Lillian never spoke of their father, his shadow sometimes flickered across her thoughts, not with longing, but with a complex ache, anger, sorrow, and defiance. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in Soho. Logan's driver had pulled over near a bookstore cafe where he was meeting an associate. The street was busy, filled with artists and families wandering between shops. Logan stepped out, adjusting his tailored coat, his mind already on the meeting. Then, as he glanced across the street, his gaze caught on a small stand at the corner. A stand with a hand-painted sign, Smith's Kitchen. His chest tightened. The woman behind the table had her back turned, arranging pies, her scarf pulled tight against the cold. Two boys played at her feet, one laughing as he chased after a paper cup rolling in the wind, the other watching him with solemn eyes. Something in their faces struck him like a blow. Before he could move and breathe, a crowd surged between them. Tourists, shoppers, street performers. When the path cleared, he forced himself to look away, jaw clenched. He couldn't. Not here. Not now. But the image seared into his mind. Two children, a painted sign, and a woman whose posture, even in the simple act of bending, felt hauntingly familiar. That evening, Logan paced his penthouse like a man possessed. He poured drinks, left them untouched, and started emails he never finished. His mind spun with questions he refused to voice. They looked like me. God help me, they looked like me. But no. He shoved the thought away. He had ended that chapter. He had been clear. If she had children, they were not his responsibility, not his concern. And yet the memory of the boy's solemn eyes mirroring his own would not leave him. Unaware of how close her past had brushed against her, Lillian focused on her growing business. The senator's wife had been faithful to her word. More catering orders came, and with them, more recognition. Still, nights were hard. Balancing two children and a rising business left her drained. But every time she kissed her sons goodnight, she remembered the vow she had made in her darkest hours. They would never feel abandoned, never doubt their worth. She didn't know fate was tightening its threads, drawing her back toward the man who had once broken her. A month later, an elegant envelope arrived in her modest mailbox. It was cream-colored, embossed with gold. Lillian opened it with cautious fingers and found an invitation inside. You are cordially invited to provide catering services at the Martinez Holdings Annual Gala Plaza Hotel, Manhattan. Her breath caught. The world seemed to tilt. Of all the clients and the doors opening for Smith's Kitchen, it had to be his. She stood frozen in her kitchen, the twins tugging at her apron, their voices a blur. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear. Logan Martinez, the man who had thrown her into darkness, the man who had denied his children. Now fate was bringing her straight back into his world. After putting Malik and Jordan to bed that night, Lillian sat alone at the table, the invitation lying before her like a challenge. She traced the golden letters with trembling fingers. She could refuse. She could protect herself from reopening old wounds. But then she thought of her sons, of the business she was building, of the woman she had become. Slowly, steadily, her spine straightened. She whispered, "If the past wants to face me, let it. I am not the same woman he left behind." The snow fell silently outside, covering the city in white. And somewhere high above in his glass tower, Logan Martinez poured himself another drink, unaware that the ghosts he had tried to bury were about to walk right back into his life. The Plaza Hotel gleamed like a palace against the Manhattan skyline, its chandeliers spilling golden light across polished marble floors, its grand halls alive with the hum of Manhattan's elite. That night, the Martinez Holdings Annual Gala was more than an event. a performance, a carefully orchestrated show of power and wealth. Logan Martinez stood at the center of it all, his presence commanding as always. Dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, his posture exuded confidence, his smile as sharp as the glass of champagne he held. People circled him like moths to a flame, eager for his approval, desperate for his notice. But for all the glitter around him, Logan's thoughts were elsewhere. They had been ever since that invitation had gone out, since whispers of Smith's Kitchen had begun to haunt him. He told himself it was business his team had chosen the caterer. Yet a part of him, buried and restless, waited. Outside, Lillian stood before the towering entrance, her breath clouding in the winter air. She wore a simple but elegant black dress, its neckline modest, its lines graceful. A borrowed coat draped her shoulders, her curls pinned back, though a few strands danced free against her cheek. Her heart pounded as she clutched the catering order in her hands. Around her, her small team unloaded trays of pies, hors d'oeuvres, and warm dishes that carried the soul of Smith's Kitchen. She had cooked through the night, every dish seasoned with nerves and resolve. For a fleeting moment, she wanted to turn and run, to escape back to the safety of Harlem, to the laughter of her twins. But she inhaled deeply and steadied herself. "This is work," she whispered, "nothing more." And yet she knew she was lying to herself. Inside, the gala was already in full swing. Lillian moved gracefully, directing her team and arranging dishes along the banquet tables. She kept her head down, but her senses sharpened with every step. It was then she felt the weight of his presence. From across the room, Logan's gaze locked onto her, as though no years had passed, as though no crowd existed between them. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. He took in her profile, the curve of her neck, the determined set of her jaw. She was older, yes, more refined, more luminous in her strength, but unmistakably, undeniably Lillian. His grip on the glass tightened. She too felt the air shift. Her hand froze over a tray of glasses, her chest tightening. Slowly, almost unwillingly, she looked up. And there he was, the man who had once shattered her, standing regal among chandeliers, and wealth, his dark eyes unreadable. The clatter of laughter and music returned, but their silence stretched like a chasm. Logan excused himself from his circle, his steps purposeful. Lillian saw him moving closer, her heart racing, but she refused to look away. She would not cower, not tonight. But just as he reached her, a senator intercepted him, drawing him into a discussion about overseas markets. Logan clenched his jaw, masking his irritation with a polite nod, his eyes still flicking toward her. And Lillian. She returned to work, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted a platter. Every nerve in her body burned with awareness, but her spine stayed straight. She would not let him see her falter. As the evening unfolded, Logan was distracted, his mind refusing to settle on business. Every time he glanced toward the banquet tables, his gaze found her moving gracefully, speaking softly with guests, her smile reserved but radiant. Memories surged unbidden. The sound of her laughter in their old apartment, the warmth of her body beside his. The night she had told him she was carrying his child. His own cruel words, his disbelief, the door slamming shut. He had convinced himself she would fade like a passing storm. But here she was, stronger, brighter, surrounded not by shame, but by respect. Near the end of the evening, fate intervened. Lillian was carrying a tray of desserts when she nearly collided with him at the edge of the ballroom. She froze the tray steady in her hands. Logan reached instinctively his hand, brushing the edge of the platter, steadying it. Their eyes met, and the years between them vanished. Lillian. He breathed her name, breaking from his lips, like a confession. Her heart twisted at the sound, but her voice was steady. "Mr. Martinez." The formality stung him. He searched her face, but she gave nothing away. Her eyes were calm, her smile polite, as if he were just another guest. "You're catering tonight?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," she replied, shifting the tray in her hands. Smith's Kitchen was invited. The name cut into him. Smith's Kitchen. Her name, her work, her pride, all flourishing without him. He wanted to say more, ask and demand, but she stepped aside with quiet poise. "Excuse me, I need to see to the guests." And just like that, she slipped past him, leaving the ghost of her scent in the air and the ache of unfinished words. Logan watched her retreat, his chest tight. Questions burned on his tongue about her life, the 2 children he had glimpsed at the market, and whether fate was mocking him now. But the night swept on. Investors called him away. Politicians clinked glasses, and the performance of wealth demanded his attention. Still, every polished exchange felt hollow compared to the storm raging inside him. Across the room, Lillian continued her work with unwavering grace, but her heart beat painfully against her ribs. The moment she had dreaded had come and gone, and she had survived. Yet she knew this was only the beginning. When the night finally drew to a close, guests departed in glittering waves, their laughter echoing down the marble halls. Lillian oversaw the cleanup, her body aching with exhaustion, her mind a whirlwind of memories and suppressed emotions. As she gathered the last trays, she felt his presence again. She turned, and there he was, standing near the entrance, his coat draped over his arm, his gaze fixed on her as though he had waited all night. But no words passed between them. She held his gaze for one long, unbroken heartbeat. Then she lowered her eyes, turned, and walked away. In the quiet of her Harlem apartment later that night, Lillian kissed her sleeping twins and sank into the chair by their bedside. She should have felt relief that the gala was over, that she had faced him and walked away unbroken. Yet her heart was restless. His voice still echoed in her ears. His eyes, filled with something unspoken, lingered in her mind. And though she told herself she did not need him, no space for his world, a whisper stirred in the silence. This was not the end. Fate had opened a door, and it would not close so easily. Meanwhile, in his penthouse high above the city, Logan stood alone at the window, the ghost of her name still on his lips. For the first time in years, the world he had built felt fragile, and the one woman he had cast aside now stood at the center of it, her presence unraveling everything he thought he knew. Manhattan glittered as always, but for Logan Martinez, the city's brilliance had dulled since that night at the plaza. The gala should have been another triumph. Investors secured, politicians charmed, headlines guaranteed. Yet the only image that lingered was Lillian in that modest black dress, her eyes steady, her smile politely distant. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Not the memory of the young woman he had once known, but the woman she had become, strong, composed, untouchable. She was no longer someone he could dismiss, no longer someone standing in his shadow, and that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. In the following days, Logan threw himself into work, hoping deals and deadlines might silence his thoughts. But no matter how many meetings he attended, no matter how many signatures crossed his desk, the unease remained. Whenever his assistants spoke of catering for future events, his ears sharpened. Whenever he saw Harlem mentioned in the papers, he paused. And at night, when the city outside his penthouse roared with life, he stared out into the dark, haunted by the glimmer of her eyes at the gala. There was something she wasn't saying. He felt it in the stiffness of her smile, the careful way she had addressed him as Mr. Martinez. Distance, yes, but also a secret. Logan was not a man who waited for answers. He demanded them. One morning, he called in his most discreet aide, Marcus, a man known for his silence as much as his efficiency. Logan leaned back in his chair. Fingers steepled his tone, calm but cold. "I want to know everything about Smith's kitchen. The owner, her history, her family." Discreetly. Marcus didn't ask why. He only nodded, jotting a note before leaving the office. Logan exhaled slowly once the door shut. He told himself it was business. He needed to know the people his company worked with. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was chasing ghosts, chasing answers to questions he had buried long ago. A week later, Marcus returned with a slim folder. Logan opened it with steady hands, though his pulse betrayed him. Inside were photographs of Lillian at the market, her smile warm as she handed pies to customers. Articles about Smith's kitchen's rise and community features praise her resilience, including receipts of catering contracts. And then 2 photographs that made his blood run cold. 2 little boys, no older than 4. One laughed as he tugged at Lillian's apron, the other clinging to her hand, solemn-eyed, watchful. Logan's breath caught. He didn't need Marcus to confirm their names, Malik and Jordan Smith. The resemblance was undeniable. The curve of the jaw, the arch of the brows, even the defiant tilt of the chin. Reflections of himself split into 2 small bodies. He slammed the folder shut, rising from his desk. Anger surged through him, not at the boys, but at her. She never told me. She kept them from me. The memory of their confrontation years ago resurfaced, her voice trembling as she insisted she carried his child. His refusal, his disbelief. He had cast her out, certain she had lied. But what if? No, he muttered to himself, pacing the office. No, she could have come back. She could have proved it. She chose silence, yet the words rang hollow. Because deep down, he knew he had silenced her. He had left her with no choice but to walk away. While Logan wrestled with the past, Lillian's life continued in Harlem. Business thrived. The boys grew taller, brighter, bolder each day. Malik had developed a love for drawing, filling their small apartment with colorful sketches of dragons and castles. Jordan, thoughtful as ever, asked questions that sometimes left Lillian speechless. "Mommy," he asked one night as she tucked him in, "why don't I have a daddy like my friend Caleb?" Her chest tightened, but she smiled gently. "Because not every family looks the same, sweetheart. You and Malik are my whole world, and that's enough." But she sat awake in the dim light when they slept, wondering how long her truth could remain untouched. Logan's first attempt to confront the truth came quietly. One Saturday morning, dressed casually in a wool coat and scarf, he drove himself, no driver, no entourage, to Harlem. Parking a discreet distance away, he walked among the market's bustle until he saw the familiar stand with its hand-painted sign, Smith's Kitchen. There she was, radiant even in her simplicity, laughing with a customer as she handed over a pie. And there at her feet were the boys. Logan froze. Malik chased a balloon a vendor had given him, his laughter ringing bright. Jordan stood closer, eyes observant, a slight frown furrowing his brow, as if he sensed the world's strangeness. When their gaze brushed his, Logan felt an electric jolt. The boy looked at him with an intensity far beyond his years, an unspoken recognition neither could name. Logan turned quickly, retreating into the crowd before Lillian noticed. His hands trembled in his pockets. It was no longer just suspicion. It was certain. That night, Logan couldn't sleep. He poured drink after drink, but the whiskey burn did nothing to ease the turmoil. The truth gnawed at him. He was a father. He had been a father for years and missed it all, their first steps, words, and birthdays. He had forfeited everything because of his pride. And yet anger still coiled within him. How dare she keep them hidden? How dare she decide alone? His reflection in the glass stared back at him, weary and grim. For the first time, he wondered if all the power and wealth he had amassed meant anything when two small boys carried his blood, but not his name. Unaware of his silent watch, Lillian continued forward with quiet strength. She received a new contract, catering for a private school event downtown. Opportunities were opening, and she seized each with determination. But even as success grew, she felt a shift. At the market, she sometimes sensed eyes on her, a presence lingering just beyond reach. She told herself it was paranoia, but her instincts whispered otherwise. After putting the twins to bed late at night, she stood by the window and stared at the city lights. She knew he existed somewhere in that glittering expanse, untouched, unchanged. She prayed their worlds would not collide again. Yet fate, relentless as ever, was already weaving the strands tighter. Logan sat in his penthouse, the folder of photographs open before him once more. His gaze lingered on the faces of the twins, the curve of their smiles, the echoes of his features. He whispered into the empty room, a confession no one could hear. "They're mine." The words hung heavy in the silence, reshaping everything he thought he knew. And with them came a vow, fierce and unyielding. He would not remain a ghost in their lives. He would claim what was his, no matter the cost or the storm it unleashed. The city was restless that evening, its avenues pulsing with the rhythm of honking taxis, flashing billboards, and hurried footsteps. Harlem carried its music, street vendors calling out children, playing in the fading light, the warm smell of fried chicken and roasted corn drifting from corner stalls. Lillian Smith walked home from the restaurant, her boys holding each of her hands. Malik bounced a little as he talked about his drawing assignment, his words tumoring over one another in excitement. Jordan, quieter, listened with a thoughtful frown, occasionally glancing at his mother to gauge her reactions. Lillian smiled, her heart full, as she listened, though fatigue weighed heavily on her shoulders. Smith's kitchen was thriving, but success carried its burdens, endless hours, balancing contracts, and making sure Malik and Jordan never felt the absence she worked so hard to conceal. Lillian felt it again as they approached their apartment building, a red brick structure tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore, that prickle along the back of her neck, eyes watching. She tightened her grip on her son's hands, her steps quickening. He was there, leaning against the black car parked beneath the street lamp. Logan Martinez looked impossibly out of place amid the cracked sidewalks and worn stoops. He wore no tuxedo, no polished armor of wealth, just a dark coat open at the collar, his figure tall and imposing against the Harlem night. When Lillian saw him, her breath caught. She thought she imagined him for a split second, that her exhaustion had conjured a ghost. But then, Malik tugged at her hand, pointing. "Mommy, who's that man?" Lillian's heart lurched. Logan straightened, his gaze steady, piercing. The boys. His boys were there, their faces illuminated by the glow of the lamplight. There was no photograph shadowy distance for the first time, just reality. Lillian swallowed hard, her voice calm, though her pulse thundered. "Go upstairs, both of you. Mrs. Howard will keep an eye on you for a few minutes." But Malik began, but one look from his mother silenced him. Jordan, more perceptive, studied Logan with wide, searching eyes. Then he nodded silently, taking Malik's hand and pulling him toward the building's door. When they were safely inside, Lillian turned back. Her spine was straight, her arms crossed, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low. Logan stepped closer, his hands tightening into fists before he forced them open again. "I needed to see you, to see them." Her stomach twisted. "You have no right. They're mine." He said the words breaking from him with raw force. I know it now. I should have known years ago, but I see it the way they look, the way stop. Her voice cracked sharply like glass. Don't you dare stand here and talk about rights, Logan. You forfeited those the moment you called me a liar and walked away. Her words cut deep, sharper than any deal gone wrong, sharper than the headlines that had once crucified his name. He inhaled, steadying himself, but the fury remained. You should have told me again. You should have fought harder to make me believe. Lillian laughed bitter and soft, shaking her head. Do you even hear yourself? You, the man with every door open to him, every resource at his command. You wanted me, a 22-year-old girl, to beg, to prove myself like I was on trial. Her voice lowered thick with pain. I came to you with trust, with love, and you slammed the door in my face. Logan's chest ached with the weight of memory the night she had stood trembling in his apartment, her eyes wide with hope, her words fragile as glass. I'm pregnant. Logan. And his voice, cold, merciless, echoing in response. You expect me to believe that? Now, years later, the echo shamed him. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the street filled the silence, the laughter of neighbors, the rumble of a passing bus. Between them stretched the years of distance, heavy and bitter. Finally, Logan broke the quiet. His voice was softer this time, almost pleading. I don't want excuses. I don't want your forgiveness. I want to know them. I want to be part of their lives. Lillian's arms tightened across her chest. Her instinct screamed to shield the boys, to guard the fragile world she had built with bare hands. And what then? She asked. You'll sweep in with your wealth and charm, confuse them, and make promises you don't know how to keep. You'll tear apart the stability I've fought for to soothe your guilt. He flinched because her words carried truth, but Logan was not used to bending or exposing the raw ache inside him. Yet that night, under the Harlem streetlight, he let a sliver of it slip through. His eyes softened, his jaw unclenched, and his voice broke lower. They're mine, Lillian, and for the first time in years, I feel afraid. Afraid of how much I've already lost. Worried that they'll grow up thinking they were never wanted. That's not true. Her breath hitched the walls around her, trembling for the briefest second. She saw him then, not the billionaire, not the man of marble and steel, but the boy she once loved, the man she once believed in fighting ghosts of his own making. But she couldn't allow herself to weaken. Not yet. You don't get to rewrite the past, Logan, she whispered. And you don't get to walk into our lives just because it suits you now. Logan stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, close enough that her pulse betrayed her composure. His voice was steady, resolute. I'm not walking away this time. Her eyes narrowed, though her heart stuttered. Then, be prepared for a fight. And with that, she turned sharply, retreating into the building before he could answer. The door shut behind her, leaving Logan in the Harlem night, the faint echo of her footsteps carrying up the stairwell. Lillian found the twins peeking from behind Mrs. Howard's skirt inside the apartment. She pulled them close, her arms wrapping tight around their small bodies, her heart pounding with fear and fury. Malik asked, his voice innocent, Mommy, who was that man? She pressed her lips to his forehead, blinking back tears. No one you need to worry about. But deep down, she knew the truth was shifting. The walls she had built for 5 years were trembling, and Logan had planted himself firmly at their door. Meanwhile, Logan returned to his car, his jaw set, his eyes burning with determination. He knew the path ahead would not be simple. Lillian's anger was justified, and her mistrust was well-earned. But the moment he saw the boys' faces, something inside him locked into place. He would not live as a ghost. He would not let them grow up without knowing him. Logan Martinez, the man who had conquered markets and silenced rivals, faced a battle he could not buy or bully his way through for the first time in years. A battle of love. And it terrified him. Morning sunlight filtered through the towering buildings of Harlem, casting long streaks of gold across the bustling sidewalks. It was a Saturday, and Smith's kitchen was livelier than usual. Lillian had agreed to cater a neighborhood fundraiser at the community center, just 3 blocks away, and the boys, as always, insisted on helping. Malik proudly carried a basket of muffins, nearly too big for his small arms. At the same time, Jordan held the door open carefully, his serious little face concentrating on the weight of responsibility. Their laughter, bright and unguarded, echoed across the busy street. From a discreet distance, Logan Martinez watched. He had told himself he would wait until Lillian allowed him in until she permitted him. But patience was not his strength, and his ache grew unbearable. He couldn't silence the image of those boys in his mind, or ignore the unmistakable resemblance. They were flesh of his flesh life he had once dismissed, and now every fiber of him longed to reach out to bridge the years lost. The opportunity arrived unexpectedly. As Lillian supervised the setup inside, the boys wandered toward the playground adjacent to the community center. Children swarmed around the swings and slides, their laughter rising like music. Malik darted ahead, chasing a bright red ball that had rolled across the pavement. Jordan followed slower, cautious as always. The ball bounced off the curb and rolled directly toward the street. Malik, without thinking, ran after it. Time seemed to slow. A car turned the corner, engine humming, the driver distracted with his phone. Jordan shouted, "Malik, stop!" But his brother didn't hear. Logan did. In one breath he was moving. His legs carried him faster than thought, the world narrowing to the small figure dashing into danger. He caught Malik by the waist, pulling him back, just as the car suddenly stopped mere inches away. The driver shouted an apology before speeding off, leaving only the stench of burned rubber. Malik gasped, wide-eyed, clutching the ball against his chest. Logan knelt, his arms still around the boy, his heart hammering with both fear and relief. "You all right, champ?" Logan's voice trembled despite his effort to sound steady. Malik blinked up at him, then nodded slowly. I think so." By then Jordan had reached them, panting, his face pale with fright. His eyes darted from his brother to the tall stranger kneeling beside him. "You saved him," Jordan said softly, his voice almost accusatory, almost reverent. Logan met the boy's gaze, and for a moment time stopped. Those eyes, intense, questioning, mirrored his own. Lillian's voice pierced the moment. "Malik, Jordan." She rushed forward, her apron fluttering, her face drained of color as she took in the scene. Her son in a stranger's arms, the unmistakable figure of Logan crouched beside him. Fear turned to fury in an instant. She pulled Malik close, checked him with trembling hands, then glared at Logan. "What are you doing here?" Her voice cracked like thunder. Logan rose slowly, his hands raised as if to calm the storm. "I didn't plan this." The ball he ran into the street. You had no right." Her eyes blazed, though her arms clutched Malik tighter. "No right to be near them." Jordan stepped forward. Then his small brow furrowed. "Mommy, he helped. He saved Malik." Lillian faltered, her breath catching. The truth in her son's voice disarmed her fury for the briefest second. Logan knelt again, lowering himself to the boy's eye level. He didn't touch them this time. He looked, his voice softer than the wind. "You two need to be more careful. Streets aren't forgiving." Malik shifted, his small voice uncertain. "Thank you, mister." Logan smiled faintly, though his chest ached. "Mister. Not Dad. Not yet." "You're welcome." he whispered. Lillian pulled the boys back, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. She wanted to scream at him to demand he leave them alone. But her sons were watching, their young eyes absorbing every word, every gesture. So she steadied her voice, forcing calm. "Come inside, both of you. We have work to finish." Malik hesitated, glancing back at Logan. Jordan lingered a second longer, his gaze sharp and searching before he followed his mother. Logan remained where he was, their footsteps fading into the community center. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly, his body humming with adrenaline. For the first time, he had touched one of them, held his son's small, fragile body. For the first time, he had heard their voices, not through paper or imagination, but living, breathing before him. And though Lillian's anger had carved deep wounds, he could not regret it. Because in that terrifying moment, he had felt what he had been missing all these years. A bond invisible, but undeniable. Lillian busied herself with arranging food trays, her hands trembling as she placed each dish. Malik stayed close, shaken, but quickly distracted by the event's excitement. Jordan, however, remained quiet, his gaze drifting back to the door. Finally, he tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Who was that man?" Lillian froze, her breath caught in her throat. She forced a smile, though her voice quivered. "Just someone passing by." Jordan tilted his head, unconvinced. "He looked at us like he knew us." Lillian knelt, brushing a curl from his forehead. "You don't need to worry about him. I'll keep you safe." But even as she spoke, she knew her words were only half actual. Because Logan Martinez was no longer a shadow from the past. He was here, real, unshakable. And her sons had seen him. That night, back in his penthouse, Logan poured himself a glass of water, not whiskey. The tremor in his hands still hadn't faded. He replayed the moment repeatedly: Malik's laugh, Jordan's searching stare, the weight of the small body in his arms. They weren't abstract anymore. They weren't a hidden truth he could deny. They were real, alive, vibrant his. And though Lillian's fury had warned him away, he knew he couldn't stop now. He had felt the bond, unspoken yet powerful, and he would do everything in his power to earn the right to be more than a stranger in their world. Across town, Lillian sat on the edge of her bed, after tucking the boys in her hands pressed to her face. For years, she had fought to protect her sons from disappointment, from the shadows of a man who had rejected them before they were born. But now that man was no longer a memory. He was flesh and blood, saving Malik with his own hands, looking at Jordan, with eyes mirrored his. The fortress she had built around her family was no longer unbreakable. And for the first time, Lillian wondered if she could keep Logan Martinez out, or if fate had already chosen another path. Sunday dawned with a hush over Harlem. The streets slower, the shops opening at their unhurried rhythm. In the Smith apartment, the aroma of pancakes drifted through the small kitchen. Lillian moved between the stove and the table, flipping golden rounds, while Malik and Jordan squabbled lightly over which cartoon they'd watch later. She smiled faintly, though fatigue sat behind her eyes. Yesterday's scare clung to her like smoke. She hadn't been able to forget the sight of Logan kneeling beside Malik, the relief etched into his face, or the way Jordan's sharp eyes had lingered on him, as though recognizing something unspoken. No matter how she tried, her fortress felt less solid today. Across town, Logan Martinez sat in his penthouse, a cup of coffee untouched on the table beside him. The skyline stretched before him, rivers of glass and steel, the city that bent to his will in almost every aspect. Yet one small Harlem apartment resisted him completely. He had spent the night wrestling with himself. He could storm and demand paternity tests and claim legal rights. His lawyers would handle the details, and no one would dare block him. But that path seemed hollow when he remembered Malik's laughter, Jordan's solemn gaze, and Lillian's fierce protectiveness. He didn't want to be a tyrant in their story. He wanted to be a father, and fathers earned trust. By noon, fate offered him another chance. The boys, restless after breakfast, begged Lillian to take them to the neighborhood library. It was their sanctuary, where Malik devoured adventure stories, while Jordan studied atlases and astronomy with unusual seriousness. Reluctantly, Lillian agreed. She needed quiet, the normalcy of routine, to wash away the unease of the past day. Inside the modest library, dust motes floated through light beams, settling on shelves lined with worn and gleaming covers. Malik darted straight to the children's corner, while Jordan approached the globe near the back. That was where Logan appeared. He wasn't in a tailored suit this time, only a dark sweater and jeans, but he was unmistakable. Jordan noticed him first, pausing with his hand on the globe. The boys' brows drew together, studying Logan like a puzzle piece that had appeared in the wrong box. "You again," Jordan said quietly. Logan knelt slightly, his lips curving in a tentative smile. "Yeah, me again." Jordan tilted the globe, watching continents spin beneath his fingertips. "Why are you here?" The question was simple, but its weight was heavy. Logan hesitated, choosing honesty over disguise. "Because I wanted to see you, both of you." Jordan's eyes narrowed, his curiosity battling caution. "You know us." Logan swallowed hard, "More than you think." Before the boy could reply, Malik bounded over, holding 2 picture books. His face lit up when he saw Logan. "It's the man from yesterday." His voice carried across the library, drawing Lillian's attention instantly. She turned, her body stiffening when she spotted Logan near her son's. The tray of returned books in her arms shook slightly before she calmly set it down. "Boys," she said firmly, walking over. "Pick your books. We're leaving soon." Malik frowned. "But Mommy, he's nice. He helped me." "That's enough, Malik." Her tone was sharp, edged with fear she tried to mask. She turned to Logan, her eyes like steel. "You can't keep showing up like this. It confuses them." Logan stood, his height a quiet reminder of the distance between their worlds, but his voice was gentle. "I don't mean to confuse them. I want to know them, Lillian." Her jaw tightened. "Wanting isn't enough. You've already done enough damage." Jordan looked between them, his small face clouded with questions he couldn't yet form. Malik clutched his books, disappointed by the sudden shift in his mother's tone. Lillian took their hands, ready to pull them away. But then Logan spoke again, softer, almost pleading. "Let me start small. Let me read with them. Just one story. If not for me, for them." Lillian froze. The part of her that was mother protector screamed to refuse. But another part, the part that had seen Logan's face stricken with fear when he saved Malik, wavered. The boy's eager expressions tipped the balance. "Fine," she said finally, her voice low, each syllable laced with warning. "One story. And then you walk away." Logan nodded, relief washing over him. They settled into a corner of the children's section. Malik climbed onto the rug, his excitement bubbling, while Jordan sat cross-legged, silent but observant. Lillian stood nearby, arms crossed, every muscle coiled like a spring. Logan picked up one of Malik's books, The Brave Explorer. His deep voice carried warmth as he read each word, painting pictures that caught Malik's wide-eyed imagination. Though trying to appear indifferent, Jordan leaned closer as the tale unfolded. Logan felt what he had longed for the first time, their fragile trust resting in his hands. Malik laughed aloud at the explorer's antics while Jordan corrected a distant river's mispronounced name, earning Logan a proud glance. Lillian watched, her heart a storm. The sight of Logan sitting on the floor of a Harlem library, his voice weaving through the pages, was a memory she had once dreamed of. But dreams, she reminded herself, were dangerous. She couldn't let her guard down. When the story ended, Malik clapped, begging for another. Jordan nodded, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Logan closed the book slowly, savoring the moment. Another time, maybe, he said, his eyes flicking to Lillian. Her response was swift. No. There won't be another time. They left the library quickly, Lillian's grip firm on the boy's hands. Yet as they walked home, Malik chattered about the story, about how the man read better than anyone, while Jordan remained silent, deep in thought. Lillian tried to drown out their voices with determination. Logan Martinez was a storm she could not afford to let into their calm. Yet in her heart, cracks were forming. Because her sons had seen him, not as she remembered him, the cold, rejecting man of her past, but as someone different. Someone who laughed, who protected, who read to them like fathers do. And the truth terrified her. Later that night, Logan stood by the window of his penthouse, looking out at the city lights. For years, his life had been measured in profits and power, in battles fought across boardrooms. But nothing compared to the quiet triumph of seeing Malik's laughter or the spark of recognition in Jordan's eyes. He knew Lillian would resist. She had every reason to. But he also knew he could not stop now. He would earn his place not with wealth or authority, but with patience and presence. Because the bond he felt growing in that library, fragile yet undeniable, was worth every fight ahead. Malik fell asleep in the boy's bedroom, clutching the brave explorer, while Jordan whispered into the darkness. "Mom," he said softly, almost too quietly to hear. "Why does that man feel familiar?" Lillian's chest tightened, tears stinging her eyes as she kissed his forehead. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because deep down, she knew the answer. And she feared the day her sons would discover it for themselves. The week that followed the library encounter was a blur of restlessness. For Lillian, each day felt heavier, and the silence of her apartment became more fragile. Malik and Jordan, with the innocence of children, often spoke of the kind man who read them stories and saved Malik at the curb. They didn't know his name, not yet, but they remembered his presence enough to keep him alive in their imaginations. For Logan, the days were filled with a fire he hadn't known in years. He moved through board meetings, distracted, his empire running almost on autopilot, because every thought circled back to Harlem, to two small boys, to the woman who once carried his heart. He couldn't linger in shadows anymore. The truth demanded light. It was Friday evening when he finally acted. The community center buzzed with life, hosting a small neighborhood gathering that Lillian had helped organize. Food tables lined the walls, children darted about, and music drifted softly through the air. Logan entered without announcement, his tall frame drawing glances as he moved past the doors. He wasn't dressed like the billionaire the papers often photographed. No sharp suit, no gold cufflinks. Instead, he wore a simple shirt, sleeves rolled, blending as best he could. But his presence was impossible to ignore. Lillian saw him almost immediately. Her breath caught her hands stiffening on the serving tray she carried. Her heart thudded, painfully torn between rage and something more dangerous, longing. She didn't wait for him to approach. Setting the tray down, she stormed across the room, intercepting him near the entrance. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her eyes blazing. Logan met her gaze steadily, voice low but firm. "I'm done hiding in corners, Lillian. I can't keep pretending they're not mine." Her stomach twisted. The word mine struck too deeply. She swallowed hard, fighting the pull of memory. She snapped that you don't get to show up after years and claim them. You made your choice a long time ago. Logan's jaw tightened. "I made a mistake I'll regret until the day I die. But I won't let that mistake keep me from them now." Their raised voices drew subtle attention. Neighbors slowed whispering as they noticed the handsome stranger squaring off against Lillian. Jordan and Malik, who had been helping stack cups at a table, turned at the sound. Malik's face lit with recognition, while Jordan's eyes narrowed with curiosity and confusion. "Mommy," Malik called, tugging at his brother's arm. "It's him!" The boys ran over before Lillian could stop them. Malik grabbed Logan's hand without hesitation, his smile wide. "Are you going to read us another story?" Logan's heart swelled painfully. He knelt gently, brushing Malik's hair. "If your mom lets me." Jordan studied him in silence, his stare unflinching. "Why do you keep coming back?" Logan looked him straight in the eye. "Because you both matter to me." Lillian pulled the boys back, her voice trembling. "Enough! Help! Mrs. Carter with the plates." They obeyed reluctantly, casting backward glances at Logan. When they were gone, Lillian turned on him, her chest heaving. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. You don't understand what it took to raise them alone. You don't understand the nights I held them while they cried, the mornings I worked 3 jobs to feed them." Her voice cracked, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. "Where were you then, Logan? Where were you when they needed a father?" The words cut like knives, but Logan didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice raw. "I was a coward. Blinded by pride, by fear, by lies I let myself believe. But I'm here now, and I won't run again." For a long moment they stood there, 2 souls bound by history, separated by pain, yet pulled together by forces neither could deny. Then Jordan's voice broke the silence. "Mom," he said quietly, his small hand clutching the edge of her skirt. "Who is he?" The question hung heavy in the air. Malik's wide eyes turned to her, searching for answers she wasn't ready to give. Lillian froze, her lips parting, but no sound came. Logan, his chest tight, dropped to one knee, looking at his sons with a tenderness that softened even the harsh fluorescent lights of the center. "I'm someone who should have been here sooner," he said softly. "Someone who wants the chance to prove he belongs in your lives." The boys didn't fully understand, but something in his tone, in his eyes, touched them. Malik reached for his hand again, trusting, unafraid. Jordan hesitated, but didn't pull away when Logan's hand brushed his shoulder. Lillian's defenses quaked under the sight. The fortress she had built brick by brick to shield her children trembled. She whispered harshly, almost pleading, "Logan, don't do this. Don't make promises you can't keep." His eyes locked with hers. "I don't break promises anymore." Logan offered to help with the cleaning when the gathering ended, but Lillian refused. Still, he lingered outside, watching as she guided the boys home. Their laughter drifted back to him, mingling with the hum of the city night. He felt a pull stronger than gravity, stronger than fear. Lillian sat by the window, after the boys were asleep inside her apartment, staring at the skyline. The image of Logan with Malik's hand in his lingered. Her heart warred with itself between the pain of the past and the possibility of forgiveness. Logan stood alone in his penthouse before the glass wall overlooking Manhattan. The city glittered, but he saw only a small Harlem apartment and 2 sleeping boys. He whispered to the night, as though they could hear him, "I'll fight for you, whatever it takes." And here, dear listener, lies the storm of truth, the past colliding with the present, the walls of pain beginning to crack under the weight of something undeniable. Logan has stepped from the shadows, refusing to hide. Fierce and wounded, Lillian stands at the edge of a choice she never thought she'd face. The boys, innocent, curious, have begun to feel the truth tug at their hearts. What happens when secrets can no longer stay buried? What happens when love, guilt, and destiny all demand the same answer? As we move forward, Every look, every word, every silence will matter. Because this isn't just about one man or woman. It's about the family they might still become. And now, if you've walked with me through this storm, let your thoughts be heard. Share what you feel and hope for in the comments. Show your heart with a like if this journey has touched you, and follow to see where this fragile, beautiful, dangerous story will lead. Because real love isn't quiet, it demands to be seen.